Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want. Welcome to episode 6.
Yay.
And we titled this episode, Are Your Kids Stuck in a Parental Allegiance and What Can You Do About it?
What's a parental allegiance?
This is an important topic.
Yes, it absolutely is.
Now, stepfamily expert Ron Deal says that kids are stuck in the dilemma of parental allegiance when they feel the tension of having to align with one parent or the other. So it's this perception of having to choose between mom or dad.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times kids will ask these questions just in their own head. Usually, you know, whose side am I supposed to be on?
Yeah.
Whose side am I on? Or who do I agree with? Who should I agree with? Mom or dad? Who's right? Who's not right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a real internal struggle that our kids have.
And it's really common,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, very. Yeah.
And what's interesting is one of the common and kind of obvious ways that we actually, as parents and step-parents, feed into this parental allegiance, which is really a dilemma for the kids. One of the most common ways is just simply through bad-mouthing.
Yeah.
Right? I want you to listen to this paragraph. I'm going to read it right out of Ron Deal's book called The Smart Stepfamily. And just listen to this for a second. This is powerful. He says that researcher James Bray has confirmed what many therapists have believed for years. When one parent speaks negatively about a child's other biological parent, the child internalizes the comment. In other words, a child who hears a parent attacked thinks in some way he is also being attacked. Listen to this. A simple comment like, "Your father's late again. He can be so irresponsible." That cuts the child as well as the parent. If the child is ever late for anything, she or he knows or thinks they know how you feel about them. In addition, a negative comment subtly invites children to agree with the comment, which children hate to do. It implies that they're choosing one parent over the other, and that really brings them a lot of guilt.
That's a heavy, heavy burden for kids.
Yeah, what a powerful paragraph to think about. And that's research backed of how it impacts our kids when we have this negative comment that we speak about the other parent.
Those little things.
It pushes them toward that parental allegiance.
Yeah.
Now, this is challenging stuff, and we're going to dive into it here. And before we kind of dive into what we want to get into, you might be somebody who's listening right now who has an ex who's under functioning. Maybe they are in some sort of addiction or something is happening there. Maybe you have an ex who is actually intentionally feeding these parental allegiances and doing the bad mouthing toward you. Or maybe you even have a really toxic ex who is really bashing your household. We want you to know, if that's you, don't dismiss the things we're talking about.
No.
We want you to hang in there with us in this episode, because we're going to talk about those 3 specific situations and why all of this is important, even when you're in one of those really challenging circumstances and your ex is acting inappropriately. So just because you're in one of those 3 things doesn't let any of us off the hook to say, oh, well, I don't know if this applies to me. It absolutely
or sometimes
applies
we
to you.
even believe that we would never do this. We would never put this burden on our kids. I like to believe that, but I've never done that. But in those frustrating moments, we can go there.
Yeah.
We can go there really easily. And this is something we need to talk about.
Yeah, to follow what you just said, there's some ways that as parents and step-parents, we can inadvertently feed into this parental allegiance with our kids.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a couple of ways we can do that. Sometimes if we're invading that other parent's time with excessive calls or text messages, trying to communicate, like over communicate with the kids when they're in that other home.
When it's not necessary.
Exactly. You know, this sounds really counterintuitive, but if you want to start to help your kids not experience a parental allegiance, you actually want to protect the time that the child has with that other parent. Mm-hmm. That can be a tough thing to wrap our mind around, but that frees them to love that other parent. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Another way sometimes that we tend to feed into this parental allegiance is when we cast blame on the other household for financial pressures or emotional pain.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if you ever catch yourself saying something like, well, we could go to the movies, we could afford to go to the movies, you know, if your mom didn't have to have her child support check every month. That, I know it sounds crazy, but believe it or not, those comments happen sometimes. Yeah. And that just puts that child in a bind.
Yeah. That forces them to make that choice. Who's right and who's wrong here?
Yeah.
Who's causing the problem?
Mm-hmm.
Where is the problem coming from? They shouldn't have to make that choice.
Yeah.
Another way that we kind of can inadvertently feed this is making the kids feel guilty if they're having a good time at their other home, if they're enjoying their time there. You know, saying things like, oh, I'm so glad you had fun at your dad's house. I just sat around by myself all weekend, lonely.
Yeah.
I mean, we can really put a guilt trip on our kids.
Yeah. So, you know, sometimes we get a front row seat to this. Do you remember? I remember one time that we had that, and it was a real lesson for us.
Yeah, it was difficult. We saw the reaction. We were rock climbing on vacation, and we had Annika with us, and she was having a blast. It was her first time
ever
she
rock
was
climbing,
lit up, so excited, and she couldn't wait to call and tell her dad about it. She was just pumped and wanted to share that with him. And so of course I'm like, yes, call your dad, go ahead. And so she called him, and she was so excited, and you could visibly see the change when he just shut her down. He didn't want to hear about it. He wasn't excited for her. And the look on her face and her body language completely shifted. And after that phone call, she was quiet. She was sullen for hours. It really impacted her. She wanted to have fun, but now she couldn't have fun because her dad disapproved of her enjoying herself with us. It was so heartbreaking to see.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't even know if he directly disapproved of, oh, you shouldn't have, you know, fun when you're with your mom, but he couldn't celebrate it with her.
Yeah.
And, you know, I kind of get the feeling of that, and I think we've experienced that before, but what a lesson learned for us when we witnessed this, and the levity and the reality of the influence and the power that we have simply by choosing whether we celebrate her victory when she's with a different parent or whether we don't.
Yeah.
And man, I remember how
that was a shift for us.
Yes.
Moving forward, every time she talked about what she was doing at her dad's house, we really celebrated it.
Definitely. What are some other inadvertent ways that we feed the parental allegiance?
Well, sometimes parents will share inappropriate information with the kids, or they'll overshare things about their own personal struggles, their own feelings about that other household, things that really should be processed with adults, things that kids really don't understand, adult matters, things they don't need to hear about. Also, we can judge or criticize the other home for their rules or their parenting styles, just whatever they're doing that's different than us. We can put them down in front of the kids. Yeah. It's really hurtful and damaging to the kids. And, you know, the truth is that when a child is stuck in that parental allegiance, when they're struggling with that, we're putting them in this position of, rather than simply being able to enjoy their time with both their parents, which is what they really need, now they're focused on making their parents feel better about themselves. They're helping to manage their parents' own emotions. It's such a heavy thing for a kid to carry.
Yep. So what do they need instead?
Well, they need freedom. They need the freedom to love both of their parents without any strings attached.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we all really want, right? We want to be able to love the people that we love without having to feel like we're letting someone else down.
Right.
And so that's really what a parental allegiance is. And man, there's so many different ways that we just don't realize. And that can be pretty heavy, and it can weigh heavy on us. And so one of the things that we've found over the years, and we're going to spend the rest of this episode kind of talking through this, is, whatever tends to come out in our attitudes and out of our mouths, in our words, usually starts somewhere in our heart and really with our mindset. Today, we want to talk about a few ways that we can kind of tackle our mindset around this whole parental allegiance, and what does it really mean to allow your child or even encourage your child to love your ex. That's their other parent. And man, that can be a challenging thought sometimes. Like, wait, I'm supposed to encourage them to love this person that I'm really ticked at. And maybe even I don't fully trust. But yet to free my child from this parental allegiance, I need to encourage them to love that person. This is a challenging thought, and it really starts with a mindset. The question really is, am I clearly focused on freeing the kids to love both of their parents? And is my attitude and my words, is it shackling them into this bind of the parental allegiance? Or is my attitude and my actions and my words, are they freeing the child to not be stuck in that bind? Now, here's the thing. This can feel really weighty, right? We could be thinking, oh, great. Now I have to watch every little word that comes out of my mouth. But you know what? No matter who you are, you're not going to do this perfectly.
No, we certainly didn't.
This is not about putting pressure, but more, how do we keep our mindset focused on the idea of freeing the kids? Because, more likely you're going to show up really well for them in the moments when it counts. If your mindset is set toward, hey, I want to free this child to love both of his or her parents, regardless. Now, just as a reminder, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, if you've got an under-functioning parent or a toxic ex or one that is feeding the parental allegiance from their side, or we're going to talk about how to deal with that, but it doesn't change the mindset that we're focused on freeing the kids to love their other parent.
We can only control ourselves.
Yep. So here's one of the first thoughts that we can kind of mull over as we're changing our mindset. And that first one is we've got to find our neutral zone. So the subject of the ex, it's going to come up in conversations. There's going to be interactions. There's transitions. We're picking kids up. We're dropping them off. There's emails and texts and all of those issues. All of that stuff. And especially when the child is around. How can we get into a mind frame, a mindset that is in the neutral zone? It's not a place of judgment, but it's more of a place of objectiveness. If I wasn't that person's ex and I didn't know all these little things I know about them, how can I stay in a position of being just neutral so that my kids don't feel the pressure of trying to not like that other parent because I don't, I'm portraying that I don't want them to like that other parent. I've got to stay in the neutral zone. That's a tough thing, not just for parents, but as a step parent, I can say that same thing. When I ran into, problems like this, I would think about, some of the unhealthy things that came from Kim's ex, and I would think, man, I'd love to nail that guy, right? Because I'm protective. I'm protective over my wife. I'm protective over my stepdaughter. And I can get out of that neutral zone really fast. So one of the first steps I think all of us have to take as bio parents and as step parents is really figuring out, how am I going to stay in the neutral zone? Yeah. Is that challenging for you as a bio parent, I would imagine?
It's so hard because you've got a history with your ex and you know them well. You can tell when they're manipulating. You can tell when they're attacking, going on that attack, blame, mode. And it can be really tough to stay neutral when you're in front of your kids. That's one of the hardest things.
Yeah. But it's necessary.
It's absolutely necessary. And we're not saying that you should stuff your feelings. We're going to talk about that in a minute, what to do with your own emotions, because those are valid.
Right.
We're saying that when the kids are around or in earshot, I mean, kids can hear through walls, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Or if you're on the phone and you think they're not listening, they actually are listening. They pick up on everything. Just when they're around, we've got to stay in this neutral zone for their sake. It's really important.
So that's kind of the first piece of getting into this mindset. What's the next one? We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
Well, the next one is to cut the comparisons. And this is hard too, because it's really easy for two households to fall into this kind of competitive mode, trying to outlove the kids or gain their favor, or they want to be here more, they love me more. And even if you're not playing the game and the other house is, it's easy to get dragged in there.
Yeah.
This is a tough one. So we've got to get out of that comparison mindset and just be who we need to be and show up well for our kids. That's the most important thing. So when you notice those feelings, I need to compete with them, or even jealousy, I've definitely had that, or resentment for what they're providing and what's expected for you to provide, or even anger.
Which is usually around material stuff,
Yeah.
right? How often do we hear that, oh, he's just the Disneyland dad, right?
Yeah.
That means I'm probably in a comparison mindset.
Yeah. So it's tough. I've struggled with this, definitely. One of the ways that my daughter's stepmom would bond with my daughter was taking her on these big, extravagant shopping expeditions and just blowing wads of money on her. And I remember one summer in particular, they went shopping for swimsuit, for summer stuff, and she purchased a very expensive swimsuit for my 11-year-old daughter. Was like,
for one season. He was going to outgrow it. It was like $150 or something.
It was, and it was at the trendiest store in the mall, the really expensive store. And for some reason, my daughter had this expectation that I was going to do the same, that I was going to provide this big expensive outfit from the trendy store in the mall for her to wear as a swimsuit. And
I think she wanted to just basicly duplicate it at our house, right?
Yeah, she had something in her mind that she had to have the same suit at both households.
Yeah.
I really wanted to lash out. I really wanted to say things like, I cannot believe an 11-year-old needs a $150 swimsuit for one season that you're going to outgrow and probably wear half a dozen times. That's just ridiculous. That's such a waste of money. And
so that's what was going through your mind.
Yeah. I just wanted to completely lash out. I really wanted to lash out, but I had to keep myself out of that comparison mindset, stay in the neutral zone. Oh, it's hard to do, so that I could communicate with my daughter in a way that didn't feed the parental allegiance. Yeah. And it was hard. Yeah. It was really hard. And I remember in that moment in the mall where she's putting pressure on me to go to this trendy store. And, I had to just stay really neutral. I'm glad you're enjoying that suit. I'm glad you like that suit that your stepmom bought for you. That's great. I have a $30 budget for your swimsuit this summer. I'm happy to take you to Target or to Old Navy, and you can pick out anything within that budget.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to stay. I had to hold my ground.
Yeah.
Without crossing the line of bad mouthing the choices in the other home.
That's really good. So you were holding the boundary, holding the line, not allowing yourself to play the competition game by blowing the budget and then risking a fight between you and I.
Oh, yeah.
Because we blow the budget. But you did it in a way also that you acknowledged. I noticed the first thing you said was, hey, I'm really glad that you're enjoying that suit at your dad's house. All of a sudden, this feeling that you had, at least in front of Annika, now becomes a validation that everything's fine over at your dad's house. It's just different over here.
Yeah.
And I wonder in that moment, do you remember what your tone of voice was like?
It was calm. It was monotone neutral. I was frustrated inside.
Okay.
I was extremely frustrated and
So
irritated.
she could probably read you a little bit.
She probably could.
Okay.
Yeah. And she, she's a kid that likes to push the limits, and she was definitely pushing.
No, wait. Are there kids who don't like to push the limits?
But I was also determined to hold my own values. I don't think I really don't think that it was necessary
felt that was
for her to have that. I wouldn't buy myself a suit for that amount of money. And so
that might not be for other people.
No.
But for you, that was a values violation if you were to give in on that.
Right. For our family, that was just not going to happen. And it was hard, though, not to badmouth the decisions made by the stepmom.
Yeah.
That was difficult.
Yeah. So I think noticing this too, like, this whole staying out of the comparison and competition, it's not that we necessarily don't have the thoughts or we don't struggle with them or we don't even sometimes succumb to playing the game. But if we want to stay in a mindset that allows our kids to avoid or get freed from this parental allegiance, then what we're really focused on is how is it coming out of us? What's our tone of voice? What are the words we're using? And again, I'm going to argue that really the only way we can make that happen is to change that mindset, change that internal voice so that the external voice follows suit.
Yeah.
To the best we can.
And honey, when I got home, when we were out of earshot of the kids, I took you aside and just vented my frustrations and my irritations. Sure. And it was a rough day for me.
It was. And that wasn't the only time. There were lots of times things like that happened. Yeah. And that's a really good point. I love, you're right. You came home and you were pretty ticked off. And that kind of leads us to this next piece of keeping our mindset where it needs to be. And that is, what does responsible processing look like? The last thing that we would ever try to tell you to do is stuff it.
No.
Like eventually you're going to blow and then that's going to leak out all over everybody.
Your emotions are valid.
Absolutely. You're going to be angry. You're going to be resentful. You're going to be jealous sometimes. You're going to feel all those things. But when we process that out loud somehow in front of the child, that really feeds into this parental allegiance. And they're put in that position of trying to please you by, kind of choosing you rather than
who's right, who's wrong.
And what we want to do is, again, allow them to love both parents freely. So when it comes to processing, when it comes to responsible processing, and this is all part of our mindset, because if we bottle it up, then we stew on it.
It's going to leak out.
Yeah. And so we've got to have a healthy way of getting it up and out of us so that we can maintain that heart position, that mindset position
in the neutral zone
in the moment, right? And so one of the things you can just ask is, okay, who in our life can we safely process with? And I'm going to argue that there's two different kinds of friends that we're looking for here that can really help. Sometimes it's the same person, but a lot of times, like Kim said, she came home and she was just ticked off. She was mad.
Oh, I had steam to blow off.
Yeah, she needed to go off. And so she needed to vent in that moment. And there's times where we do need to vent. But we've got to be very careful. Like Kim said earlier, kids have big ears. They're always paying attention. They're listening through walls. So she had to make sure that we were in a place where she could vent to me and just bleh it all out, if that's a word. I don't know if that works on a podcast.
Safe venting is what we're looking for.
Safe venting in a place where it didn't negatively impact Annika. And I sometimes am that person. I can either really listen quietly, or sometimes we've got those friends that are like, yeah, you're X and this and blah, blah, blah. And they kind of join the bandwagon. You know, when you're in a place of venting, that's not the worst thing in the world.
As long as it doesn't.
I don't want you to go over the
forever.
top with that. And I don't want you to land there, but sometimes you really need to get it out. And so that's kind of one way that you can find a friend that's going to allow you to do that.
We have stuck couples vent to us all the time.
Absolutely.
And it's very therapeutic for them to get it off their chest.
Just get it out. There's times where we can do that. But then we've got to find a point where we can transition. Maybe it's to a different friend who's really more focused on our growth. And they're not the one who's going, oh, yeah, you're X and we should do this. Let's go egg their house and stuff like that. You know,
don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah. But we need that other friend who's going to say, you know, how can we think about this problem more objectively? How can we get out of the pain that you've experienced with that person in the past and stay focused on the healthy situation that you want to put your child in?
Yeah.
And all of us have at least one friend like that who's willing to ask us the tough questions and challenge us, and not just agree with us or jump on the bandwagon, but really challenge us to say, you know, what's best for the kids right here?
Someone who's learned how to be objective themselves.
Exactly.
Who can be objective with you.
Exactly.
That's
help. Right. So this, again, it's all about mindset. We want to find that neutral zone. How can we stay in the neutral zone when we're with our kids? One of the ways we stay in that neutral zone is we cut the comparisons, stop getting into that competition mode with the ex and figuring that out. And then when we do run into issues, how are we being responsible in the way that we process those things? Just those 3 steps can really give us a new mindset around how to free our kids from the shackles of this parental allegiance.
Yeah.
And the more we can do this, the better a better position we can get our heart and our mind in, the more success we're going to find in what comes out of our mouths. And I want to remind you, this isn't about being perfect. There's going to be times where you mess up and you slip up, and that's okay. Just pick it up and keep on going. But if you get that heart and mindset right, then more often than not, you're going to show up well for your kids when it really counts.
Yeah.
And so I want to remind you of that.
If you do slip up and you recognize and you realize, oh, I shouldn't have made that comment yesterday. That was really not okay.
Yeah.
You can go back to your kids and let them know, you know, I'm sorry I said that about your dad. I shouldn't have said that. I'm going to work really hard at not saying negative things.
Yeah.
And just let them know that you realize that isn't something that you should be sharing with them.
Yeah. And you know what? That's powerful. Some of the sweetest and most powerful times I've had with any of our kids has been when I've come to them with an apology. I've had to lay my pride aside and say, hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
Those
and that
kids are so forgiving.
Absolutely.
But that'll release that burden. They can let that go. That can help to undo anything that's been said.
Yeah. Now, you might be saying, that's great, Mike and Kim. That's so sweet. Let's figure out how to stay in this nice little mindset.
In a perfect world.
But here's the deal. My ex is
a wreck.
They're underfunctioned. They're maybe steeped in addiction. Maybe they're living a lifestyle that's way, way opposite of yours.
Maybe
or
they have some kind of mental instabilities going on.
You just don't feel safe to have your kids around them. Well, that all might be true, but the reality is the kids still feel that parental allegiance tug if we're not really careful about the way that we approach all that. Let me challenge you with this thought. What kind of compassion can you find in your heart that might impact your words and your tone? Because a lot of times when we're dealing with an underfunctioning parent, then a lot of times we have the primary custody or they get most of their time is with us. So the biggest impact that we have is the way that we communicate about that other parent. And even though that other parent is underfunctioning, the likelihood of your child wanting to still be able to love them the best they can is pretty high. And so if we can find it in our heart to really have some compassion toward that, then our words and our tone will change with that. And this can be really hard. But again, the purpose isn't to let your ex off the hook. It has nothing to do with that. It's really about interacting in a way that allows your child the freedom to love them even in the midst of their dysfunction. Yeah. So if that's you and you're really struggling with that, I want you to know that your mindset around all this still really counts, and it still really impacts how your child is either stuck in this parental allegiance or freed from the parental allegiance. Yeah. So I challenge you to think through that.
Yeah, it's really important. Mm-hmm. And there's, a lot of times if we have an ex who is feeding into the parental allegiance,
so
bad
they need to listen to this episode.
Yes, they do, but they probably won't. But if they're bad mouthing you or criticizing your parenting or the choices you make in your home, and you're very aware that this is going on, that's tough. Mm-hmm. That's a very difficult situation for your kids. And even more important, that you work to lift the burden on your end. You can't control what your ex does. Mm-hmm. You have no choice in that, but you can choose to lift the burden on your end as much as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. So don't use your ex's behavior to justify your own actions.
That's right.
Right? It's not an eye for an eye thing. It's not well, they're doing it, so it's okay for us to do it. No, it's still not okay. Mm-hmm. And, kids clue into that. They realize when this is not healthy. Mm-hmm. And any parent that engages in bad-mouthing the other parent, it actually ends up backfiring. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So even if it's happening in the other home, you be the strong one. You rise above it. You take the high road and do what's best for your kids. That's the most important thing.
That's right.
Yeah, you're probably not going to change your ex's mind or their actions by criticizing them or telling them. They probably aren't going to get it. They kind of need to be convinced there's a problem by someone other than you.
Yes. Yeah. You weren't able to change their minds when you were married to them.
Yeah. Chances are it's not going to happen now.
That's right.
Yeah. So they need to experience their own conviction, their own knowledge about this before they're going to do something about it. Unless you have a really cooperative relationship and they are willing to listen to you. That would be very exciting.
Which happens sometimes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But your job is to keep your own mindset in line and your own words and actions appropriate, regardless of what's going on in that other home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes there's people who take this thing to a whole new level. Mm-hmm. We've heard some real crazy stories about exes who are really toxic.
Yeah.
We've had some personal experience around that, and they get very toxic toward your home. And again, take that thing to a whole new level. Bad mouthing, slander, manipulating, purposely undermining or trying to be intimidating along the way as well. Mm-hmm. And that's really challenging. And again, just like Kim just said, this isn't letting you off the hook from keeping your mindset in line, but there's a whole nother level that we really need to talk about. And so we're wrapping up this episode, but we want you to know that we've got a 2-part episode coming up where we're going to tackle the problem of the toxic ex. Yeah. And here's the angle we're going to take. We're going to take it from the position of how can we support our kids when there's a toxic parent in that other home. Yeah. Because really it's all about how we're going to invest in the kids. And we're going to take that from two kind of separate positions. But it's going to be, I think, a great 2-part episode for you to tune into.
And this is a question we get asked all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we deal with that toxic ex? Again, we're going to focus on the kids. So don't miss it. If you're not already subscribed to this podcast, I would encourage you to go ahead and hit subscribe now, because you don't want to miss that 2-part episode coming up. And if this is bringing you value, we would love to hear about it. If it's not, we would love to hear about it. Would you consider taking just a couple of minutes to leave us a rating and an honest review on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify, anywhere you might be listening? We would love to get your feedback. We want to continue to improve, but we also just want some indicators that we're bringing some value here.
Yeah.
So,
and if you have any ideas for future episodes, you can jump onto our Facebook page and let us know.
Yeah. That's just look up Mike and Kim Coaching on Facebook and you'll find us and you can leave a comment there. We would love that. So that is wrapping up episode 6.
Yeah.
And please don't miss our 2-part episode coming up about the Toxic Ex. And that makes this one a wrap.
Bye for now.